the aim of this video is to go about converting a DS prop into something that can be rendered in Bryce. So we're going to have to start in Dash Studio, and then I'll show you how to convert things into Bryce as best we can. So this is the prop I'm going to use for my example, and I'm just going to launch Dash Studio now. I've gone through the install manager process, so it is somewhere in Dash Studio. So yeah, that's going to be the first challenge, is finding the prop. So I'm not really very familiar with this particular piece of software. So supposing you've launched your Dash Studio and it doesn't look like mine. Well, the reason for that is, as you can see, I've just deleted the figure there. I suppose I should have mentioned that. I always delete that figure because I'm never going to use that figure. It just appears there. Probably there's a preference that I can use to make sure that doesn't happen. But anyway, if your Dash Studio doesn't look like my Dash Studio, it's because I've changed the layout a bit, because the tabs before in its default mode were a bit big. So if you want this to look like mine, I've got Style, select Style, and the style is dark side. There's a little drop down menu there, and the layout is under Workspace, select Layout, and it's City Limits. So that's just that. So then the tabs should be where they are for me. Right. Now we've got rid of that figure in the middle, go to your Smart Content tab, which they pop in and out when you click on these things. So that's selected now. This little arrow for default, and it's in props in this case. So if I click on props, it'll show me the prop. Right, to export that to Bryce, that needs to be selected. There's some tools here, and the one you want to select the object is this little figure, and then you can click on the thing you want to export and it gets this orange outline, and then go File and Send to Bryce. Cross your fingers and it should launch Bryce for you and translate that prop over into Bryce. So it's just doing the material reading now, and then I'll give it a quick render and you can see where we are. So let's move the camera around a bit so we can get a closer look at our subject. So at the moment it's all grouped together as one object, but it's made up of separate components, and the materials have come across from Dash Studio, but they're not really appropriate settings for Bryce. You can see it looks a bit shiny, and they've all got the same family group at the moment, which these are the family groups here, and they're all of family 21. So what I'm going to do is change the materials one at a time and then assign different families so I can see what's left of the model that needs changing. So hold the control key down and left click, and you can see a menu, and this top selection here is the entire object, and the bottom one is one of the components, the material of which I want to modify. So left click on that, and then I'm going to assign its family group. So I'll give it this blue colour, and I can call that the metal bits. Right, and then go into the material lab. Okay, it's getting its textures from a parametric mapped image. So this means that this is a UV map, which allows the certain parts components that are in this. We can look at this actually. It's made up of these shape components that are applied to the surface texture via a map that tells it where they should go. So some of these things, like these lights, might not appear on this actual bit of the geometry that we're seeing. If we can do actual selection here, you'll see what we've got. So this is actually only taking the metal bits from this image, and as things stand, this reflection level's a bit high for Bryce. So I'm going to turn the reflection down to 5, and this bump here, that's a bit low, so I'm going to turn that up to 20. Right, what else have we got? A yellow specular colour. Well, we can actually do slightly better with the specular in Bryce than just a spot. We can use the anisotropic effect, and we can actually place the anisotropy under the control of the colour channel here, and then if we use this option to do tangent mapping, it'll change the way that it's mapped onto the surface, so it responds to both the bump output and the colour channel. So that'll create a nice anisotropic specular highlight that will improve its appearance as appearing to be a metal. So that's just a nicety we've got there. You can probably see on the preview that it looks a little bit better, but you should be able to see on the render when we look at that in a minute. I want to check in here under the material options, because it's been brought in the depreciated Bryce 7 bump mode. So we either want to choose legacy bump or enhanced bump, since this is the least favourable option. So I'll choose the enhanced bump that came with 7.1, and having made those changes now, with the specular highlight we might consider turning it up, but it's a bit excessive, or down. Let's see, depending on the light. We'll leave it at 20 and see how that looks. So that's fairly modest level there. Check out of here and give it a quick render. So you can see that's changed its appearance quite radically just with doing those few small modifications. Now you can see that hopefully that this metal looks better than the metal we've got on these other bits that's still looking a bit shiny. Right, so let's do another metal bit. So hold the control key down, left click and select metal 04. Go into the material. Oh, before I do that I'm going to assign it to family group for metal bits. Okay, now go into the material lab. Right, the UV map for this is different. So one consideration then is if you went into the family selection, I'll just show you that now. If I went into the family selection, selected all metal bits and then tried to modify the material, it would make all the UV map images the same when I did that as I checked out, and then you'd lose the mapping. So the family grouping's only to help me identify the bits. I shouldn't select all the bits by family and then modify the material, because that would mean all the materials would end up the same. I'm just warning you there of that possibility. So hold the control key down, left click and select the component you want, because it's got a different UV map. We have to modify it separately. We can't do all the metals together. So go into the material lab and reduce the reflection, take it down to 5, take the bump up to 20, increase the anisotropic effect, place it under the control of the colour channel, go into here, select tangent mapping, and then go into here and enhanced bump. And that's set things up the same as the last bit. So let's see, what else have we got in here. We've got something in there in that channel there. I can see that. So left click and it's a light. So I'll have to create another family grouping for lights. So let's use this pale colour here. So lights on model, and then go into the material lab. Right. If it's just a light, then we can just use the ambient channel to create that glow. In fact, before I modify that, I'll show you. Right, the ambient channel is provided its power output from the global ambient colour. So if I give this a quick render now, and then we can see that metal's been updated, and then change the global ambient colour to something dramatic, and then look at what changes, you can see what's deriving its output from that channel. So this little display there, these lights here, these lights in the bands. So okay, and then if I want maximum output from that channel, I just set it to fully white. If I want more ambient output from that channel, then you'll have to look at one of the videos about hypertextures, because you can overdrive this effect to create special effects like actual light output from this surface. But in the regular rendering mode, you don't get that. So anyway, that's a digression. Let's go back to materials. So this light, well, if it's not going to be anything other than a light source, it doesn't need specular response and it doesn't need reflection. So turn those down, and it can just have well, some diffuse response and some ambience. If I wanted it, say, to look like it was also a glass with the light behind it, I could use some refraction. So if I set the refraction up at 153, that of glass, make sure the transparent colour is set to 0, and oh yes, you can see there's a little error with materials from DAZ Studio. Even though the volume was actually set to black, it displayed as white there, so just be aware of that. So if I want to make this look like glass, now I've set the transparent and volume to fully black. Now, either of those will do it fully black for this effect as it happens, and then set the transparent up to 100%. What you'll get if you're in normal transparency mode is grazing angle reflection. So these bands will also look like the glowing bands are behind glass. So that could be an effect you were looking for. You can include specular highlights if you want. In this case I don't think that's really necessary with this very small area that we're dealing with. So that's one of my glass effects. So I'll just try and remember the settings on that, because we're going to have some more like that, I'm sure. So okay, right. Don't need to worry about any of these additional modes in there. That's not really a problem, because there's no bump output. We don't need to change the bump. So remember to change the family grouping there. Let's have a look. There's some more bands on that bit there. I bet they're a similar effect, aren't they? Yes, quite tricky to select sometimes. Let's see if we can find it. I'm holding the control key down and left clicking and seeing if I can pick one of those other bands out of there. This is why I've changed the family grouping, so if I can't get it, I can always, when it's the last thing, select that family. Right, light 03, and then make sure I've changed the family grouping, so now I've done it. So lights on model, go into the material lab. Where were we? Don't need specular, we were going to have transparent, we don't need reflection. We're going to get the reflection from grazing angle, so set the refraction level up to glass and make sure that both those are set to fully black, which they are. So you can see in the preview, because I've used actual selection to see what I've got on the model, that they're only little area, so you probably won't see much of the effects otherwise. And this is again ambient, so that's our little glowy bit there. You won't see much difference on those. Let's have a look what we've got in here. We've got a glass panel. That should have some interest. So this is a glass surface. So I'll give this a different family group. Let's do this bright magenta colour here. Call that glass things in case there's more. And then go into the material lab. Right, nothing is appearing here. And we use current selection, which should be a sphere. Yes, it's completely invisible. So the reason for that could be, let's have a look in here, material options. Alright, we've got blend transparency, so it'll just vanish if it's fully transparent. So let's switch normal mode, and now it appears fully black, because we've got transparent colour set to fully black, so set that up to fully white. This volume colour, be aware, it might look fully white, but always check it, because of this error when it sends it over. It can sometimes just read as fully white. So now it's fully transparent, so you can't see it again. And the diffuse channel appears to be doing nothing because we've got no diffuse output there, so that's somewhat redundant. We have some specular, but the specular colour's set to fully black. It's all a bit strange, this, really. So I'm going to set this up to fully white. We get a highlight now. Set the specular halo down to fully black, so that narrows the halo. Set the specular up so we've got a highlight. What we need is a bit of reflection off this surface, and one of the reasons we're not getting it, well, we could set reflection up, but that would just be general reflection. What we want is one that's appropriate to a glass material, so let's go for grazing angle. So let's give it some refractive index, and you can see now the diffuse colour has been pulled into the solid material by this. So this is just a glass surface. In actual fact, we're not really gaining anything from having this UV map, unless we were having coloured glass, but we've got a material behind that to provide that effect, so we can just set that to fully white, and we've essentially created standard glass. So I could have gone into the library with this and then sort out standard glass, but we've made it ourselves, and it's allowed me to explain some things, rather long-windedly, I admit, but there you go. Right, so I'll just check out of here now, and we'll have a look at our standard glass. So you can just see a little bit of reflection coming in there. What's behind this glass? Another light. So we've got a family group for the lights on model. Go into the material. Don't need specular really. Don't need reflection, so I've got the glass over the top. So I've got the colours. That's about it really, I think, for that. I don't need anything else, because with the glass being over the top I don't need to add any other effects, because it's got that layer, so it's just lighting up. So there we go. I think that render now doesn't look radically different, to be fair. What else have we got? So there's a thing here, a screen. Alright, so we'll call this, I don't know, what else we've got spare? This one here, screen one, screen. There's only one screen. Let's look at the material options for it. So it's getting effect through ambient. It's got a bit of reflection. I don't know whether it's got a glass surface over the top of it, or we might want that reflective effect, but at that level, that's quite high. We could get rid of the reflection and use transparency and make sure that this was set to fully black, so it's not actually transparent. I'm just getting the grazing angle reflection. Make that like glass 153. Okay, that's set it up there. It might benefit from specular, but it won't do anything if we've got no specular highlights, so I'll give some specular colour and then set the specular halo down so that it gives me a nice sharp highlight there. So that's made it glow and have a glassy surface. There's no bump, so I don't need to worry about the enhanced bump setting, and I'm not using anisotropic. So that's done the screen, so that looks a little bit different now, and we'll just see whether there's anything in front of that. No, there isn't, so it was appropriate to have that surface. So let's have another metal. Now I've got a family for metals, metal bits here, so I go into the metal and we used anisotropy for that, put a blob in there, set it to tangent mapping. It's got a bump blob there, so let's use enhanced bump and take the bump effect up, which is set very low to, I did 20 last time, which might be a bit high, I don't know. Set the reflection down to 5, because that was what I set it for, the metals, I think. So check out of that. I've set the family, let's give that a render. So that's modified that bit. Is there more to go at? Oh yes, another metal section here, and it's gone around those bits there too. So metal bits, there we go, and material, same as before, anisotropy blob in there, tangent mapping, enhanced bump, turn the bump effect up to 20, turn the reflection effect down to 5. I think that's done everything. Check out of that, give that a render. Remember to change the family group. I did. So what's left? Something here, which is very small. Let's see if we can get hold of that. Is it another metal bit? Cable. Okay. Right. Well, I don't know what it is yet. Oh, it's a metal bit. So I'll just give that the metal bits selection. Go into the material lab. Oh, is it a metal bit? It's got a bit of bump. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's something else. I'll change its family group in a second. So I'll turn the bump up. I'll give it enhanced bump. It's got no reflection or transparency and it's quite dark. It's got a bit of specular. I'll give it some anisotropic. No, it hasn't got any specular output, so it's pointless. So the specularity there, if there's a specularity setting, it probably wants specular, so I'll give it some specular, and then I'll experimentally give it some anisotropy, set the tangent mapping, because it's a small thing, so I don't really know what it's going to look like, and I'll set it to a different group. So I'll bright green here, call that cable. Right, is there anything left that hasn't been converted? I think there's a bit something in there. What's in there? I'm not really sure. If it's only one object, let's see, family 21. It looks like one object. Let's see what its attributes are. Screen 01. Is that its attribute? So let's see if we can pick it out as a thing in itself. I'll just make sure it's only one thing, because of this problem, if you get two things selected and then go into the material lab, both those things will adopt one of the materials from one of the two things. Let's have a look in here. So what is this supposed to be? If it's a screen, maybe it's another light up thing. So I'll just check my other screen setting so I can make it a similar setting. So 100, 100, 100, white, black, 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 glass. Okay. Didn't use anisotropy, so it's probably a glowing little glowing thing in there somewhere. So let's see. I think I've got a family group for the screen. Yep. So the screens now. I'll go into the material. So it was 100, 100, nothing, nothing. 1, 5, 5, 3. This is a good test of my memory, isn't it? No bump, no anisotropy, specular halo, and specular effect. So specular wants to be up at fully white, specular halo down there, and it's got its glowing effect in there. So that's all set, I think. So at this point, and it's taken a little while for only a small model, I believe, and I can check, oh, I can just see something lit up in there. If I just move my camera, I'd have seen that probably. I think we're more or less there with this. The final check is to make sure that there's no more family grouping of the original object. Now just be aware, because this is all one object, if you modify the family grouping now, you would be in a situation where you lose all the groups assigned already. The total group would change all the settings within it, so just be aware of that. Just a little bit of a thing though when you've carefully assigned all your family groups and then you suddenly lose them. So at this stage now I'll go on to provide a final render to show the effect. In fact, if I do a side by side with some lighting setups of the original imported object with its materials as they came in, and then I'll do one with a render setup that I've provided. And if you want to know more about rendering in Bryce, then there are other videos on that matter, but this was really just focused on taking this object from DAS Studio and then converting the materials so they're appropriate for rendering in Bryce. There you go then. I hope you found that interesting and useful, and that's the end of the video. Cheers now.